Folks, welcome. We are going to talk some golf. I am happy to say on the show this afternoon, with thanks to our sponsors, Sky Sports. There's kind of a lot to get through. Plenty going on. Golf is getting into that sweet spot. We are under 50 days to the Masters. And happy to say of the friedegg.com. Once again, he was on a couple of weeks ago. And as predicted, people really enjoyed him. Kevin Van Valkenburg is with us, KVV. I do have permission to call you that. Warm
Please
welcome once
do.
again.
Yes, please do. Please do. The KVV it became a nickname in like when I was at ESPN, and it's just kind of riding with it ever since now. So happy to do it.
Good. We're coming to people a little later than planned today. I'm not one to apportion blame. I think that's a childish, immature thing to do. But if we are to blame anyone, it would be entirely KVV. I just think we should
This is
state that
true.
as well.
I'll eat this one for sure. Very sorry to the fine Irish people who are like, "What the heck? Why? Where is my daily pod?" So yes, it's on me. You can
Yeah, your
blame me
commute's
directly.
ruined. Tweet him abuse. It's okay. So I want to start in a few different play. Well, I'll start in Riviera. A few different aspects there. Tiger Woods was obviously tournament host and was in the CBS booth. I'm going to play a clip in a second. By the way, it's this slightly unsaid thing with Tiger and Riviera and the CBS booth. Almost infamously, prior to his terrible car crash, he was in the CBS booth and didn't look in the full of his health. It's kind of become this unofficial check-in, like early in the year. How's Tiger? I thought he looked in the full of his health really good.
Yeah, it looks better. I think it's interesting. Obviously, I think about this with Tom Brady, great quarterback. He is always talking about fighting inflammation. Everything he does is to fight inflammation. And you can see that. Sometimes I wish that Tiger could hook up with Brady, because you can see sometimes when Tiger is feeling sort of inflamed, when he looks puffy and not himself. It looks very different than he did. Some of that is aging, but some of that is just kind of life. I know he mentioned he's still lifting a lot, trying to stay jacked in the weight room. But there definitely, he's times when he looks a lot better, and this was one of those times. So it's definitely true. That was kind of a moment of like, oh man, when he was in the booth those years ago, and just looked very tired, looked very like his words were kind of coming slow to him, and you just kind of hope that he's able to kind of manage the pain that he's been in for a long time with his life throughout, various golf injuries and car accidents and such.
He was joined, obviously, of course, by Jim Nance and Trevor Immelman. And he had said in the previous few days at the press conference that the Masters was not necessarily off the table. And so, as we can hear here, Nance picked and pulled at that thread.
And of course, McIlroy will defend. Scotty will be there. Anybody else who might be playing this year?
I know I'll be there. We're gonna open up the patch, and Trev and I are gonna be being part of a great dinner.
I didn't ask specifically about you. I just thought maybe you knew someone, though, that might play.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people are playing.
Is there a possibility that you can get out there?
There is.
That's exciting.
Would you play a tournament before that?
I don't know. I don't know whether it's regular tour, senior tour, or member guest. I don't know.
Member guest? You need a guest?
So, KVV, it sounds like he's going to try and do the improbable here.
It does. And I guess what I would say to that is, what is our expectations, and what can he sort of reasonably produce? I think anybody who has been in my position in the last few years has written the story of, isn't it heroic to watch Tiger grit and gut his way around? And he made yet another cut at Augusta. I think he's at 21 cuts straight there or something. It's the record. It's a streak I'm sure that he doesn't want broken. But he's also always said, like, I'll never compete in these tournaments unless I think I can win. And so is it sort of an irrational feeling to think that you can win the Masters at this point? I don't know what the right answer is. At age 50, a lot of different things have been repaired in his body. And I wish that he would be more open. He's never been open about this, so it's like wishful thinking, but I wish he could be more open as to like, what exactly are you getting out of it at this point? Because if it's to enjoy the walk. It's to compete in the tournament, knowing like you never know, like things might happen. Then I think that would be really interesting. But if we get this sort of same rigmarole about, oh, I'm only here if I can win the tournament, I think it comes off as a little bit delusional in that sense, which is fine. But I also don't know that we need to be buying into this idea of like, well, could Tiger pull off a miracle? Like, there's a lot of other stories that are perhaps more interesting in that sense. And I don't know that we benefit as media by hanging on to the idea of could Tiger win uh, for longer and longer until it's actually like, hey, it's Saturday afternoon at the Masters, and he's 2 shots off. That maybe this is interesting.
It's so interesting. You've taken that answer exactly where I wanted to go with you. So it's only 7 short years since he won the thing, and so that's in everybody's kind of lived memory, and it was so extraordinary. But obviously, 7 brutal years in the interim for his body. I mean, he's coming back this time from a ruptured Achilles and back surgery. So the last number of times he's played post winning it, in the COVID it won, in the autumn of 2020 he was tied 38th. 2022 he was 47th. 23 he withdrew. That was his plantar fasciitis period. And then 2 years ago he finished 60th. And yet he will invariably in the press conference, if he plays, say, well, I only ever tee it up because I think I can win. And then no TV pundit wants to fully say there's no chance Tiger Woods can win just because he's still Tiger Woods. There's like a 1% chance. But I wanted to ask you, are people increasingly torn on this Tiger showing up at the Masters? Because, as you alluded to, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he will suck up almost all of the oxygen, and we've seen that routine before. But it will be so Tiger heavy, as opposed to kind of, Scotty could be the greatest player we've seen since, or telling other stories. And then on the Thursday TV broadcast, he will be a featured player. And so I think people have increasingly had this experience where Monday to kind of 12 rounds into Tiger's Thursday round, he's such a prominent figure, and you have this sense of what was all that about by like mid Thursday afternoon. People are torn about this Tiger and the Masters.
I think what's interesting, when you think about the people's perspective who are there, I would say at least half of the people who are there, it's the only time they've ever been to the Masters and the only time they'll ever go to the Masters. So their feeling is, well, I want to see Tiger at the Masters. I don't care what he shoots. I want to have that experience to be able to always say, man, I walked around Amen Corner and saw Tiger hit it into 12 or go for it in 2 on 15 or 13. And so that energy is like a part of the fan experience in a lot of ways. But I think from a media perspective, it's almost like a sort of a false god in the sense of, man, are we really going to write this story again of like, whoa, could Tiger get in this? Could he have a chance? The players who are, in their prime and are more likely to actually win, they don't seem to mind it because the spotlight kind of then turns a little bit away. And Rory has talked about this of like, well, there's a few years where I thought I was going to be able to fly under the radar a little bit because Tiger, was the whole story. Tiger coming off 19 in 2020 was a fall Masters. Everyone thought that was Rory's best chance, like a fall Masters. Tiger's the defending champion, and Rory was awful in the first round, and ended up missing the cut. So it's just kind of, I don't know. I think that some perspective would be good in the sense, like you can enjoy the ceremony of it. He's always said, I don't want to be a ceremonial golfer, but there is kind of a ceremony, and it is kind of an aura of watching him play around there. I fell for it the first few times that I, was there and he was there. But I just do think it would be healthier for the game if we sort of put him into a different category of like, it'd be fun. Boy, it'd be a miracle, but zero expectations for this anymore. Like not even like an outside expectations chance. And he is such a driver of interest and has been for a long time. Well, I think it's a little bit less than it used to be, but it's still going to be like a lot of casual fans. That's what they want. They want to tune in and see him on the featured groups. They don't want to see some of the younger players because they're casuals, and that's just what they're drawn to.
Yeah. And look, if I was at the Masters and I've never been and he was playing, I'd make it my business to be there because it's so iconic. And this is sort of the problem the sport has. Like it's still fully emerging from the shadow of the most electric presence it has ever had and likely ever will have. And his competitive years aren't a million years ago. I mean, 2019 is not that long ago. And so like even the media is trying to kind of wean itself off him, but easier said than done. I mean, I guarantee you now the Golf Channel website on the Tuesday of Augusta, if he's playing, 7 of the top 15 stories will be Tiger related.
Yeah, that's true. And, I think I've found even from our own SEO stuff, I've written Tiger pieces, when his 50th birthday came around that I thought would ripple across the internet, and they didn't quite the way that I thought they might. And so I do think that there's a little bit less of hunger for it, but also like all the people who are often making those editing decisions and are people who lived through the Tiger height of it. And so they're feeling as like, well, we can draw this kind of interest and this kind of traffic. Let's throw it out there. And so, I just feel like Bryson and John Rahm and Rory and Justin Rose, and there's so many interesting, good storylines, obviously, Scotty, that I don't know that we need to, I don't know if waste our time is the right word, but like expend so much energy on the Tiger storyline. Let's at least let it kind of develop. And then if you want to say like, oh, you never saw this coming, yeah, guilty as charged, man. I did not see Tiger Woods competing in the 2026 Masters. And if you want to label me with that, that's fine. But I just think everyone's so worried about looking silly if they get it wrong, like this, oh, you doubted him. And I just don't know that that's a healthy way to frame your media coverage.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, I mean, Tiger Mania will continue in perpetuity, probably. The Ryder Cup came up as well in his press conference. So he was asked about the Ryder Cup at Adair Manor. And it was kind of a weird phrasing. He said in response, they have asked me. And it was like, and he said, my input on it. And everyone said, they have asked me my input on it. So I don't know. I presume if his input was, I'll be the captain, they would take that input on board. He said, I haven't made my decision yet, which implies, to be fair, they asked him, I haven't made my decision yet. I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to do with our own tour. That's been driving me hours upon hours every day, trying to figure out if I can actually do our team. And he's on 2 boards. Obviously, people are well aware of his relationship with JP McManus. This is out of Dare Manor. I don't know, KVV. It was like the most lukewarm response to being asked to be Ryder Cup captain I think I've ever heard. In a way, it completely typified his relationship with the Ryder Cup. Yeah, I mean, it's not a priority. I'm not saying no. It was strange. Like you kind of want Tiger if he's going to take it to be like, you're damn right, I'm doing it, and we're going for revenge. I'm doing the next 4 and walk out. You know what I mean? But it was like, I'll see. I'm really busy. I'll see.
Yeah. The thing that I keep kicking around in this discussion is how do we know that he'll even be a good Ryder Cup captain? Like there isn't a lot of evidence to suggest. People keep pointing to the President's Cup in Melbourne. Oh, but in a lot of that, what he did was kind of roll the balls out and be like, okay, boys, who do you want to play with? I mean, it's not like you're going up against a behemoth in the internationals who has won and tied 1 President's Cup in the whole history of the deal. I mean, I think, to me, you imagine Tiger Woods sitting in a room and the analytics and data people come in and show him, this is the proper way to play the hole. I could very easily Tiger being like, well, why don't you just hit like a big old sweep draw around this tree and like hit it to 3 feet? Like there's a great adage in America of like great players don't make good managers, good coaches, because they can't conceptualize how a mortal would hit a shot that is required. They're just like, well, you just do it. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, some of these guys who've tried coaching, a lot of them weren't great as a result of it. And so I don't know. I think Tiger, from his perspective, I wouldn't really want to take it in a dare because you're likely to lose. Just historically, like the Americans are not particularly good in Europe. They've banged their head against the wall over and over trying to do different things. You're probably only going to do this once, so why not do it in a place where you're more likely to be favored? You have the advantage of being able to set up the course a little bit more than I know that the rules are changed a little bit where you don't have quite as much advantage to set up, but you do have some advantages and some decisions you can make. Like, wouldn't he want to do it at, Hazeltine or Olympic or what are the, even in DC, like when he's got a crop of young, hungry kids who are ready to sort of like, exert a new era of American dominance. And Rory's 44 years old and can't quite be, Tommy's 46 and can't quite be the Ryder Cup killers that they've been. I just see that as being a more likely scenario for him. Some of the PG, oh, I'm working so hard every day to get our tour stuff. Yeah, I'm sure you are in some Zoom meetings and your stuff, but I don't know that I buy that it's a 10-hour a day. You're grinding over like where the cognizant will be in the schedule next year.
Yeah. Which we're obviously all concerned about.
Yeah.
It's funny you raised that interesting question. How good a captain would he be? And there's always a degree of mystery to that with every captain, of course. Like certainly, and we saw it in the President's Cup in 18, which you mentioned. And to be fair, we see it anytime he plays, and the younger players treat him as like borderline a tourist attraction. They just want to say, I played a round of golf with Tiger Woods. So you figure he would be an inspirational figure, even if he wasn't necessarily inspirational in raw terms. And then unlike the data and the numbers, which is something that the Europeans often feel they have an edge on, or the Americans on. It's funny with Woods. There's often allusions to his intellect, and he is an insomniac, and he'll stay up and read science books and maths, and this is a super smart dude, and like sometimes you get glimpses of his golf IQ when he's like recording a video for TaylorMade and chatting with other players. You get these glimpses. But again, in keeping with Tiger at large, he's never let us into that kind of almost towering intellect that people hint at. We've never ever seen it, but people do say it's there, and I'm not doubting necessarily, but we really have never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, this is someone who went to Stanford and got good grades, so he got into Stanford and he did fairly well there, and he's been successful in certain areas of business. And if you do listen to him talk about swing geek theory stuff, like there is no one smarter. I've been present for, a few of those conversations that even weren't recorded, and it's even more fascinating. It's even more nerdy because it's not like performing for any kind of camera.
Okay.
And I just don't know. He is someone whose instincts was a big part of his golfing too, his feels. And so I don't know that I believe that he would embrace the intellectual side of the data stuff that, Dodo Molinari has been so essential in making the Europeans like gain every single 1% advantage that it adds up over the course of the tournament to a big advantage. I just think that his idea of playing golf is often more like, we'll just get it done. Like, just be a man and suck it up and go do it. And I don't know that that's certainly not the way to win in Europe, where the energy of the crowd is going to be against you most of the time. So I don't know. I mean, I just think you mentioned it before, his attitude towards the tournament, I do think he cares, but I don't think he's ever really kind of grasped how to make others care or how to make others feel comfortable around him. And this idea that the boys will be inspired to win for him. Yeah, maybe, but also like you still gotta be the right pairing. You gotta hit the right shots. So this is certainly an interesting debate. I think the unsaid thing in the U.S. Ryder Cup succession program is whatever plan they had, Phil Mickelson blew it up by blowing up his own career and removing himself from the line of succession. And so now, like Stuart Sink really wants to be the Ryder Cup captain, and everyone's waiting around for Tiger to decide. So if Tiger says no, then is Stewart, behind the process? Meanwhile, the Europeans probably have their next 3 Ryder Cup captains sort of privately lined up, and they're figuring out like, well, Luke might do it again, and the continuity will just continue forward. So the Americans immediately are putting themselves at a disadvantage in terms of strategy just by they can't figure out like getting someone to say yes and doing it properly so that we know that one captain is learning from the next.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating. Well, look, like I said, I just wish the media would stop talking about this guy. I mean, honestly, we're above that here. You know what I mean? So also at Riviera was Rory McIlroy. Interestingly, he's taken this week off. The Cognizant, he's going to take in Augusta National and, quote, work on some things. Jacob Bridgman was the story. McIlroy finished just behind him. First man to win at Riviera on his debut since 1975. Had been in good form coming into it. So like it's McIlroy's early form. I've got a clip of him here, but Middle East was so, and then at Pebble, he just had some big numbers, which cost him. He was tied for 14th, but like he threw in a triple and doubles, and listen, I say this after my round, but if he had not thrown those in, it would have been a very different score. And then was thereabouts at Riviera. So here he is. He was asked after the round on Sunday because he couldn't putt all day on Sunday, nothing would drop. And then ironically on the 18th, he made a 29-footer, which was the equivalent of the feat of putts he had made that round until that point. So here's McIlroy with some post-round thoughts, Riviera. He's pretty happy where his game's at.
Was it almost cruel to see the one on 18 go in after so many slipped by earlier?
No, not really. I mean, it probably earned me an extra 400, 500 grand, so it was fine.
Rory, do you find it odd at all that like 5 months ago, and I know it was on the other side of the country, basically all the fans like kind of despise you at Bethpage Black, and then you play a weekend like this and everyone's like trying to drag you to victory almost and not rooting for the American Jacob Bridgman?
Look, I think it's completely different, right? Playing in a team setting and playing against the United States of America compared to, I tried to take the treatment a little bit like a compliment, as if, they saw me as a threat and they were trying to get to me. So, but no, look, the support that I usually get week in, week out on the PGA Tour is absolutely amazing, and I certainly don't take it for granted. And today was no different.
Last year, obviously, you won Pebble, you won the Players leading into the Masters. This year, you said good West Coast swing, but how would you assess the state of your game right now versus last year? And is that something that you even do at all, or how would you kind of look at that?
I think it's pretty similar. I mean, if you look at, how I played last week, the birdies that I made, I made a few big numbers, but I was able to cut those big numbers out this week. I think only had 3 bogeys for the week. So I feel like my game's in really good shape. I'm looking forward to getting on some, Bermuda greens over the next couple of weeks. And but it's feeling good. It's feeling much better than it did in Dubai, which was a big step in the right direction, and just have to keep working.
And looking at the stats, KVV, of his 2 PGA Tour events, driving second, approach to green first, tee to green combined first, putting 70th on the Poana. Look, he didn't win like he did at Pebble last year, but I think he's looking more than okay 50 odd days out from Augusta.
Yeah, I think, this sneaky thing is like he would be great to see a Masters where he and Scotty were both in really good form, or where, Scotty had to chase him down and Rory having, the feeling of like, well, I've already won one of these. So it's sort of, I'm freed up a little bit. I'm not actually like concerned about the putter. If you're a Rory McIlroy fan, those greens were just so weird and so bumpy and so, they were fast but soft, and so I think it's kind of more of a good sign that he, his approach game looks really good. His wedge game looks really good. He's figured out how to play the kind of golf where you change trajectories and you change heights and you can throw kind of, if in a baseball term, throw sliders and throw fastballs and throw knuckleballs even when you have to. And he seems to be mentally in a pretty good place. Like he's pretty light, didn't seem bothered or angered or annoyed by anything in this stretch, even though it didn't result in victories. So I'm kind of bullish on him going forward. The players can always sort of be a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of, do you get bunch of wind one day? Are you in a wave that, it's really cold in the morning, or it's just, it's a tough golf course. But, driving it really well, like that's kind of huge. And I just think he's going to be able to put himself in contention in a big tournament with what he has going on right now.
It's really kind of under discussed about him at this stage, and maybe it's just because his Masters Odyssey loomed large over all discussions around him for so long. And you'll have an appreciation for this because you've followed the sport for so long, and you see sometimes great players only get relatively, even great players can sometimes have a short window. Like his longevity is probably massively underappreciated. And I was reading a piece by a colleague of yours actually on the fried egg. And so McIlroy is number 2 in the world rankings. I appreciate not all the live players are there, but he's number 2. And McIlroy has been in the top 10 for at least part of every year, and generally for most of all of these years, for 18 consecutive years, to when he first went into the top 10 in 2009. And so the record is held by Tiger Woods, 20 years in the top 10, albeit there was a very big gap when he was out injured and his back and his glutes weren't activating and all that stuff. So he didn't actually do 20 consecutive years. So Phil Mickelson did 19 consecutive years in the world's top 10. McIlroy and Ernie Els are both in 18. So like McIlroy hangs around the top 10 for the next 2 years, which is eminently likely. And basically nobody in the history of the world rankings has had a longer stint in the top 10. It's a remarkable achievement. And again, you know how hard it is out there. You've seen like guys struggle. One part of the game goes, the game goes.
Yeah, you think about this, like when Rory first got in the top 10, Scottie Scheffler's 11 years old. And yet they seem kind of like their contemporaries, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is Scottie just is an old soul. He looks a little bit like older than he sort of is, but 11 years old. And Rory was, contending at the Masters, and then they'll come to this year's Masters and they'll still both be in contention. So it just shows, it's what I think is interesting about Rory is he has adapted and changed as golf has changed, right? Back when he first came in there, like, not every driver head was as big as possible could be. Not every shaft was maximized. TrackMan was becoming prominent, but not every single golfer was optimized and maximized in terms of their thing. Speed. I think Jacob Bridgman swung the golf club this year as fast as Rory used to swing it when he first came on tour. And it seemed like Rory had a massive advantage in terms of driving ability. So it just shows you how much faster the game overall has gotten. You have to be fast to compete. And even he has like continued to get faster and continued to get stronger and continue to stay flexible. And I think that's something to be really admired. I think one of the things I admire the most about him is that he used to be just a crap US Open player. He just used to completely, on very tough courses, he would make a double and then he'd just kind of eject mentally. And now he is probably one of the best US Open players there is. Like, you could look at the results recently, and even though he hasn't won, like, it really bothered him at Pinehurst because that was tough, traditional US Open hard track. And he was so close to winning that and just let it slip away. And I think that's one of his biggest goals going forward. You'll see is like, he wants to prove I can win like a true like US Open. I can win in like a very difficult Open Championship track. And I think he's got the game to sort of do it. And that shows the sort of evolution mentally of what he's overcome in the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's impressive because obviously money no longer a motivation and hasn't been for some time. And, it's funny, I spoke to him a couple of years ago at an Irish Open about that US Open switch up, and it's a very concerted improvement on his part. He reevaluated his PGA Tour schedule and said, I need to play harder PGA Tour events to get better at US Opens. It was a very deliberate kind of thing. And who knows, I say in retrospect now, I think maybe being stuck on 3 legs of the Grand Slam for a long time, that'll keep you hungry. If you win 4 early, then it might be a little bit harder. Who knows?
Oh, it just was interesting. I think about the live guys, like the courses they're playing in anticipation of majors. Like, does it come to a head more when you see that are they optimizing themselves in terms of playing the kind of tracks that would get them in position to be ready for a major? I think it's a fair question to ask when you think about that, when Rory did everything to focus towards the majors. And, if you're a player at live, you can't necessarily do that because you might have to play a course that's a little bit subpar in terms of like its toughness.
Okay, well, you've taken me right there again. So I got to talk to you about one of these stories in golf this year.
Take a step back and enjoy this. Attaboy. It's one of the greatest comeback stories in any sport in history. How sweet is that hug from daughter Bella, wife Emily, who have helped AK turn his life around. It's a tale of redemption, sobriety, mental fortitude, and the strength of love and family, and the banishing of demons. Anthony Kim has stunned the golfing world.
Now, KBV, even this melted your icy live heart.
You know, I think as a story, Anthony Kim as a comeback is really, you know, it is interesting. It is something that what I was struck by, I think, in some of it is this idea that Anthony Kim had haters out there, that people were, you know, that his idea, the very first thing he said after he won was, well, I know the mainstream media won't cover this, which was sort of kind of a funny framing, because how many people were up like at 2 a.m. in the United States, like watching Anthony Kim sort of pull off this comeback? Like, I don't particularly care to hear Anthony Kim's views on anything outside of golf, but as a golf story, I think it's a really kind of it's fascinating what he had to go through, and the personal hell that he sort of pulled himself out of. That's a compelling thing. And you know, did it give Liv the juice that it certainly was the first organic moment, I think, that they had, that anybody who may not have been paying attention or might have dismissed it, might have said, oh man, that is a kind of a cool story. And it's in some ways, Anthony Kim winning that tournament, him being the person, sort of saves John Rahm and Bryson from having to answer questions with like, how could you blow like a 6-shot lead, you know, in Live Adelaide? And Live Adelaide is proving to be like a very compelling, fun tournament, right? And I think they think that the South Africa event will also be. I just was struck by this idea of, what if Live was just all in Australia, like, what, or was all, you know, in these places that are really hungry for golf? Like, why do we need to go to Riyadh and to Thailand or Jakarta or these places where there's just not actually like a big hunger for a golf tournament? Obviously, the reason that they don't do that is because it's, you know, a sports washing operation that is meant to sort of do other things other than actually grow golf. But I think it works in places that are hungry and starved for good golf. And, you know, like the energy of those places it's kind of appealing. It's fun to watch. And that's what Anthony Kim provided, is energy and real genuine reason to care whether you wanted him to win or not. And so, you know, I don't know that I don't know what Anthony Kim's future is as a professional golfer. This might be the height of it. But I think, you know, it's sure a fun comeback either way for him as a golfer.
Yeah. Like even for slightly younger listeners, because, you know, his heyday is coming up on 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was a real hot shot and kind of thrilling new figure on tour. And then obviously the last time we saw him was the 2012 Wells Fargo until Live Saudi Arabia 24. And he became like a mythical figure in that time. You know, there was like, I'm exaggerating it a bit, but it was like Anthony Kim seen buying coffee. You know,
Oh yeah.
It wasn't far off that. The drug use, the alcohol addiction seems to have been, you know, so severe so early on. What would you tell us about Kim? I'm sure he was somebody that obviously crossed your radar, either in thought or in person.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's every now and then in sports, like you'll see someone who is such a phenomenal talent, but just is not ready to deal with the crushes of fame, right? Who just was overwhelmed by the opportunities of partying or substance abuse, or used that to deal with stress. You know, there's a lot of like football players, Ryan Leaf, Johnny Manziel. I don't know if any of those things, but like, from what I understand about George Best, like he was a massive talent who was a severe alcoholic. Like there's a lot of players in every sport throughout history for whom substance abuse became a way to deal with the pressure, but they were such gifted talent that it almost felt you like feeling robbed, like you didn't get enough of what their greatness was. And I think for a long time, that's what felt like with Anthony Kim. I mean, Sergio was such a Ryder Cup killer that Americans had sort of grown used to, like Sergio just was going to stick it to us in the Ryder Cup. And so when they played in that Ryder Cup match in 2010, it was such a cool moment for Americans. Like maybe we found our own sort of cocky Sergio type, someone he had this big belt buckle that was, audacious and with his initials on it. And he was so focused on kicking Sergio's butt that he didn't even know the match was over when he had won it. And he sort of, stomped off to the next tee when someone had to tell him like, hey, go shake his hand. It's over. But there, you always knew that Anthony Kim was like not, it wasn't sustainable in some way. They would always hear stories. Oh yeah, he's out drinking with the boys. He showed up hungover at this thing or this commercial shoot. And there's a famous video that's on the internet of like Tiger Woods talking to a group of people with a microphone on, where he sort of explains, this is how I think about hitting an 8-iron. I know it's going to go this exact distance. I know I can, with a draw, it'll go this way. And Anthony Kim is there and he's like, yeah, man, like, I don't know. Sometimes I just hit it. And he's like, that's so much more complicated than what I'm thinking. And you couldn't help but think like, oh, okay, like this person, if they got more serious, how much better could they be? Anthony Kim never really contended in a major. He made a ton of birdies at Augusta one year, sort of set the record for birdies, but it never was really like, gonna win that Masters. And that sort of left you feeling wanting. And so you couldn't help but kind of wish that like this legend would return. Legends never die. That was kind of a thing people said about Anthony Kim. And then when he came back, he was just kind of okay. So this was the first glimpse of like, well, maybe the talent, is still there. You didn't kill off all the talent.
And what do we know about his years in the wilderness? Like there was always the much talked about insurance.
So many different things, I think he is like purposely misleading in some sense. I've heard, he played Monday games all the time, but he didn't want to reveal it because it would be, violating his insurance policy, this payout that he got. And then he told Netflix people, well, I didn't have a single club. He went out to Netflix was going to film him as part of Full Swing, and he had to borrow a club from his wife. That was the only club he had because he had given away his clubs. And so, nobody knows, I think, the truth except for Anthony. I mean, I've heard enough from people who actually saw him hitting balls a lot the time in Dallas to know that it's BS a little bit to say like, oh, I never touched a club for all this time. And I've heard people will attest deeply to, yeah, I played with him. But playing golf, scoofing around, hitting balls in the range is just so different than playing tournament professional golf. It almost is like a different sport. And so, I know I have a journalist friend who tried really hard to do a documentary about Anthony Kim and like tried to reach out to him. And their response was always like, oh, we're working on our own documentary. We've filmed a bunch of footage for it. But, it's been 2.5 years now. We haven't seen any kind of evidence of that sort of emerging. So I don't know if we'll ever get the right answer about what all those years were like.
Last topic, another larger than life figure. And you know what? This guy is open to mockery. And I take a dim view of people who go down that route. Like this kind of stuff, I just don't like.
I'm hopeful that Ricky Fowler will not be distracted by the young girls at the Mall of America in between the matches. As we know that the young man is a fine-looking fellow, and I just worry that this mustache is going to be limiting in the number of ways he can focus on, as all the ladies will be all around him at the malls and such. And hopefully, he'll have enough time for push-ups.
I don't know, KV. Who goes in for that kind of stuff? Really, I don't know.
True. I'm sure there's some listeners out there like, who is that? Why is he playing this insane deranged clip? That is me doing Gary Player at some point. Ryder Cup? I don't even know. That's I don't know where you dug that up from. Yes, Mr. Player in the news always, constantly. Can't ever escape being in the news, I think, particularly in the build up to Augusta every year.
Yeah. So he's upset because he asked Augusta, can I play a round of golf with my 3 grandsons? And unlike, Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Player was never granted membership at Augusta National. Therefore, you need to play with a member. But he asked for this concession. My grandsons, I'm a 90-year-old man one round, I want to point at the trees and show them different things. And the answer was no. And obviously, his son Wayne's impromptu golf ball advertisement over the shoulder of an ailing Lee Elder did not go down well. Clearly, I mean, it's horrendous. Really, it was such an important moment for Lee Elder. So player's not happy, and when he's not happy, he's not afraid to voice that unhappiness. I think some people will sort of think it's not an unreasonable request for an old man and his grandchildren, but clearly they do not like him. So, so talk to us about them not liking player, them not giving him membership when they gave it to the two of the other big three.
Yeah, it's a really interesting window into I think a wealthy part of America. Like, it isn't always the wealthiest part of that people are extended to members at Augusta. It's like a certain kind of classism that the club runs on, like kind of an old Southern sort of way. And for whatever reason, Gary has never quite fit in with that kind of American aristocracy in some ways. Maybe it's just a little bit too loud, a little bit too brash. I mean, for the most part, it's also like Augusta kind of ran on this idea that, like, hey, this is an American club. This is a Southern place. And so I think the fact that he just wasn't an American, even though he has, embraced the president of America at the hip and decided that he is, a patriot in the strangest ways sometimes, he is a foreign-born person. And it's very hard for those for foreign-born people to get into Augusta as a full members. And every year Gary says something that reveals a little bit that he's slightly annoyed about this, that he's never quite been embraced the same way that Arnie and Jack were. And some of that kind of feeling slighted is what's driven Gary his entire life, his entire career, is this slights of, I should have been, he's always quick to mention the big three. And there's plenty of people who'd be like, well, Tom Watson's just an important character and he's not in the big three and all that stuff. It just sort of is a window into Gary's personality. I think it's funny, the whole contention of, well, how dare I not get a foursome? I mean, he could play with a member and walk along and explain all the things to his grandsons without playing. I mean, he's played Augusta, 100 some times. He could get that. I'm sure that they would be fine with that, but it is a hard line in the sand that they draw, where it's like, if you're not a member, you need to be accompanied. I mean, in theory, Rory McIlroy just won the Masters. He couldn't call them up and be like, I'd like to play with my dad and Harry and Niall Horan. Like, they'd be like, well, we really need to have a member take you out, and we'll be happy to arrange that. And so I'm sure that someone would be happy to arrange having him around there, but it's just those privileges are reserved for people who, have probably paid the $250,000 to be a member of the place and continue to pay the dues and show up to the meetings and have compete in the club championship and all the things that are sort of important to a club being a club. And Gary has no one there probably was a route for Gary to become the first foreign-born true member at Augusta National, but for whatever reason, he rubbed the wrong people the wrong way, or he didn't shake hands enough, or he didn't kind of kiss up to the right people, or he didn't make the right donations, or, and I think he kind of forfeited that with some of his choices. And, that you kind of have to live with that even at 90.
Yeah. I mean, he's not taking it lying down. He said, him, Arnie and Jack, we made Augusta. I mean, they'll love that. We made Augusta thanks to the coverage publicity we generated. Whether the club likes to admit it or not, they won't admit it, but we made Augusta. So it's kind of ensconced now, I think, that they're adversaries. This is a very difficult question to kind of answer. The general perception of player in professional golf, is he, kind of liked for all the wrinkles and the oddities, and the ego, and maybe because of the ego sometimes, all my friends are dying and I have a new girlfriend, or Or is there kind of a rolling of eyes at Gary when he comes up in conversation? Again, difficult
Sure.
question to answer. I'm sure you haven't taken a poll.
I think that he's become such a caricature of himself that people almost kind of don't appreciate his golf accomplishments as much as they should. I mean, 9 majors is a lot of majors, and winning all around the world and like, doing all this stuff. I saw a golfing list today that had Sam Snead ranked ahead of Gary Player as like the all-time greats. And I thought, how silly does that seem? Like Sam Snead, very fine player and won a lot of tournaments, but you know, some of those tournaments were like hit and giggles with 4 guys. Gary Player went literally everywhere in the world to sort of kind of be an ambassador for golf and showed up there willing to kick butt. And I think, he won a match. I think the most underrated major of the last 50 years is his final Masters win. I mean, he was 41 years old and shot the lowest round in the final round, 64, that's ever been shot by a winner, still to this day. And nobody talks about it with the same reverence that they do, Tiger in 2019 or Jack in 1986, or even the Palmer's last Masters victory. I think it's a remarkable, he was a remarkable golfer. He was 5'8" or whatever, and smashing the ball out there as far as he could to, be able to sort of just get the ball into the hole. You probably couldn't tell me what's one thing that Gary Player did well. Some people are like, oh, bunker play. Well, you don't win majors with just bunker play. Gary Player was like a golfer. Gary Player, and so I think I worry sometimes that people have forgotten that about him because he can be such a clown. But that's, again, it's to Gary's own decision of what the kind of person he wanted to be. And, it'll be interesting when he does pass. He'll probably tell you another 25 years of living to, 115, what his legacy will sort of be like, because so much of the last half of it, and maybe I'm guilty of, shaping it in some ways with this, has been kind of a joke, like him just going on wild rants about, calling Chambers Bay like a disgrace and a disaster and a travesty, I believe was the right word. Yeah. Golf course being referred to as a travesty.
Well, that was one of the great rants, if anyone wants to check it out again. I mean, and it's funny, it is mocked, and you kind of alluded to it there, not in a mocking way, but like his fitness, it is actually phenomenal. And he has been talking this way for 40, 50 years to anyone who will listen. And here he is at 90, and actually he's entitled to turn around and say, I told you. Like, it is a remarkable aspect to Gary Player, his fitness.
Yeah. I mean, Arnie's, been dead for almost 10 years. Jack is 86, 4 years younger than Gary, and can barely walk. And Gary is out here like doing, 50 crunches on camera and showing, running on the treadmill at its highest setting. I mean, this man is going to get as much of life out of it as he can. And, whether that's vanity or whether it's just, pig-headed determination to prove everyone wrong, like he's still getting those years. He's still going to have great grandchildren that he's able to sort of lift above his head, which is just a remarkable thing. Yeah,
it really is. It's a big life, a big life. KVV, that was brilliant. Really, really great to get your thoughts. We might check in around Masters time or something, but in the meantime, thefriedegg.com, Kevin Van Valkenburg. Real pleasure again, Kevin. Thanks.
Always true. Thank you.